Hey friends, it's Andy. Welcome to our new show, Accelerate Expresso. Look, I know you're busy, and it's hard to keep up with all 6 of the great episodes we publish each week. So, with this show, Accelerate Expresso, we're going to deliver highlights from each episode from the previous week. And in the process, give you short, delicious shots of insight from a show you might have missed, and to help amp you up for the coming week. Now, before we jump into it, please remember to visit iTunes or Google Play or wherever you listen to subscribe to this podcast. And while you're there, leave a review, please, for Accelerate. We need your feedback to ensure that we keep delivering the high levels of value you expect. Okay, let's Expresso. First up on this edition of Expresso, from episode 512, is Stephen Moulton. Stephen is president of Action Insight and author of The CEO's Advantage, 7 Keys for Hiring Extraordinary Leaders. We talked about these same 7 keys and also got into the topic of how managers can really make their people much more effective sellers.
And I think that that's one of the challenges that new leaders particularly face, is because they've moved from an individual contributor role where they have been basically running themselves, and now they have to engage others. And the first instinctive thing is to be either micromanager, controlling, or to do...
Well, what you're right is driven by fear.
Which is driven by fear of losing control, or just giving up and letting everybody just run amok. So they need to, in addition to developing their people and getting to know their people, they need to set a standard for what is expected. One of my things, I have a GPS, if you will, of expectations that I have for me and the group. And my first expectation is, call me out when I don't live up to my own expectations. I want my team to do that, because sometimes I am not aware of when I'm not doing what I expect done.
On Tuesday, in episode 513, I spoke with Babette Ten Haken. It's Babette's second appearance on Accelerate, and she's the founder and president of Sales Aerobics for Engineers. And in this episode, we talk about how sales reps should master being relentlessly curious, researching the industry and the subject matter deeply to become experts, and how they should be ready to ask great, if not spontaneous, questions to uncover the customer's needs.
And folks, I immediately sent Andy an email. I just said, this is brilliant, and it's so timely. Because what I've discovered is that in working with salespeople, when they think they've discovered the question that needs the solution and the answer, they stop the sales process short. And I'm a scientist by training, and Andy, you're a technical professional by training, and that's where they stop the sales process. However, in science, that's the question where that's the foundation of the type of question that they need to start asking. There's a question in back of that question that they've just spent a lot of time discovering. And determining that question has to do with context.
Right.
What is the context? And I have a saying, I always say root causes have really big contexts. And without taking the time to discover the context of the buyer's question, sellers will propose inappropriate solutions and they'll end up selling themselves short. So what was your take? Yeah. So what was your take on your brilliant
on Jonas Salk's brilliant quote? Well, and for me, it's been one of those quotes I always sort of keep around and keep referring to and refer lots of people to because to me it speaks to never being satisfied. You start talking about the relentless curiosity, but the moment you're satisfied with what you think you found out, to your point precisely, you stop selling. And then the sales process is sort of frozen in time. And, there are certain things you're doing, like code development otherwise, where, it's really important to freeze the code at a certain moment in time. Mm-hmm. But, when you're working with the customer, it's not that first aha moment that's really the aha moment. It's that's really the start. And so this idea of self-satisfaction or thinking that you've done it, you've discovered what their pain, quote unquote, pain point was. Yeah, not so much. And so it's really, you have to think about the fact that you're doing discovery throughout the entire sales process. we tend to sell it short by saying, yeah, well, this is, the second phase of our sales process, and we have certain exit criteria, and you meet those. So on discovery, great, you're going to go on to the next phase. But there really is a discovery component in every step of the sales process. And the moment you stop is your odds of winning the deal go down pretty dramatically.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's an archaeology, quite honestly, to it. I mean, a lot of times, and you and I too, for example, I'll get a lot of calls and requests for executive coaching, and I deal with complex business sales and technical environments within the industrial Internet of Things ecosystem. So they either make stuff, process stuff, or automate processes. But depending on who I'm speaking with and their professional discipline, we discover why they would like that coaching. And often what they call or what they assume they want isn't really what they need. So how many sellers would go close the deal since we've got a buyer, right, that's gung-ho for coaching? But often you end up proposing the wrong solution. So in my case, often there's a non-disclosure agreement. It's signed, information's exchanged. It allows me to establish why they need coaching. And often what they feel coaching is about is sales philosophy, is customer acquisition, customer success, and customer retention. However, I don't stop there at their question. That's not my aha. And how many people would be jumping up and down and go, ooh, let me send you a proposal and sign on the dotted line. Yes, they have a problem, and I certainly do have a solution for their problem. However, they're making assumptions that their problem has to do with inability to close complex sales after demos, for example. So if I propose a coaching program for their definition of the problem, that they'll have the same problem again and again.
Right.
And why is that? Because during the discovery process, as well as in reading the information they send me and in subsequent conversations, I discover the real question that they are not asking themselves. And that's when you start to have those conversations that even they didn't realize they wanted to have with you until you start having them. And that's quite honestly where we sell the value of our solutions, whether it's coaching or whatever we're doing, or our software or whatever, because we took the time to discover the real question behind the question that they were asking, and behind the questions we're asking them. It makes all the difference in the world. Is to discover the unasked question.
Next up in episode 514 is Tony Hughes. Tony is another repeat guest on Accelerate. And hey, the good ones get to come back more often. So anyway, Tony is the founder and managing director of RSVP Selling. He's a blogger, widely read blogger, and author of a couple books, including The Joshua Principle, as well as his latest book, Combo Prospecting, the powerful 1-2 punch that fills your pipeline and wins sales. In this episode, we talk about Tony's new book about prospecting. And Tony says it takes multi-threaded strategy with the right combination of tactics to really make prospecting effective. So you want to check this little blurb out and then listen to the full episode on Accelerate.
Well, let me give you one example. One of my clients here in Sydney, but they're a global operation, so they're actually headquartered out of the US, but I was in their Sydney office. One of their sales guys was telling me that within the business, if they want to go and do calls to follow up on sales or build pipeline, they're not allowed to do it from the sales floor. They need to actually go and book one of the pods or booths that are dedicated to calling. And there's only a small number of those in the office.
Why?
Because management don't want salespeople that are banging away on the phone, disturbing other people in the office, which to me is just an act of insanity. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because you really want to create a bit of a buzz in the office, and you want people to be leading by example. There's another client I was talking to in London. He's another consultant in London that was actually interviewing me on his show, and one of his clients that he went and visited had actually taken, if you can believe this, had taken the phones off the sales floor. They decided to go 100% all in on social selling. So, their view is people don't answer the phone anymore anyway, so we're just going to go all in on social. And again, that is just a massive act of insanity. We need the right combinations of channels and activity if we want to go and be successful in sales.
And how's that going for that company?
They ended up putting phones back on the sales floor. This consultant worked with them to make sure that they did that. It was just crazy.
Yeah, and that, as you said, that's just an act of sheer insanity or wishful thinking, in which, in almost a clinical, pathological sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolute nuts. So talk about the combinations of right activity. That's at the heart of combo prospecting. So tell people what you mean by that.
Well, what many salespeople do is they'll make a phone call and leave a voicemail, and then they'll think to themselves, well, I don't want to leave any more voicemails for the person because it'll seem like I'm desperate. And they just get too passive and they get too linear in trying to break into an organization. So they'll think, well, I want to get to this person, and they just target that one person. So what I believe it takes to be successful today, and what I'm seeing my clients have huge success with, is adopt a multi-threaded strategy with the right combinations. So you use a product like Sales Navigator. You go and identify the power base in an organization, all of the people that would matter to you, and being able to get a solution into that organization. So the thing we know today, it's never one person that makes the decision. It's up to 7 people or groups of people. Even a strong leader will want consensus before they'll drive any kind of change. So we've got to identify obviously the most senior person that owns the problem, the people below them and around them that would be part of achieving consensus to make the decision. And then we need to go at all of those people concurrently, is really my view. And if any of those people bumped into another one in their organization and said, hey, is that Tony Hughes guy, has he left a message for you too? If that to me is a really good thing, not a bad thing, if you have the right narrative. So what people need to do with the right combinations is they need to phone their cell phone, leave a voicemail message, send an email, send an in-mail, and even in the initial outreach, also send a text message. So you want the person thinking, man, this person is determined. I may as well get back to them because they're going to keep contacting me. And if you've got the right narrative so that you don't come across as a sales pest, if you've actually got value for them in the conversation, because the way that salespeople need to think is that I'm going to provide value for the person in the conversation, the initial conversation I have, rather than act like the only time that they will get value is if they buy from me. So we need to do those things really, really well, and we need to do them in short succession. So it all needs to happen within about 90 seconds, 2 minutes per outreach. And every time you leave the office each day, you need to make sure you don't leave the office without knowing exactly what that call list is for first thing in the morning. So what I recommend to people is that they get into their office by 7:45 in the morning. So before the people that they're trying to reach are subsumed into endless meetings all day, that they're on the phone to them while they're traveling into work or before they get into those meetings. And you create the habit of doing that every single day. Because again, what I see with salespeople is they'll have these flurries of activity to try and go and build pipe because they've either missed their number or they can see that they're about to. So they'll have all of this prospecting activity and pipeline generation activity. And then once they get a little bit of a decent pipe, they then back off and they focus on trying to progress those opportunities and they neglect prospecting. But the reality is it needs to happen every single day as a disciplined habit.
In episode 515, I spoke with Paul Teshima. Paul's the founder and CEO of Nudge.ai. And in this episode, Paul and I had a really interesting conversation about artificial intelligence and sales, where it's going, where it's being used today, and what it's going to be used for in the future, and how that's going to impact our day-to-day sales life. So be sure to check out the entire conversation on iTunes or on my website at andypaul.com.
Absolutely. So that is one sort of train of thought around AI. I think the second, which certainly we are going down and others are as well, is that AI can be used to tackle problems that a human does today that they have to do. They are repetitive. They take some thought, but they are typically more behind the scenes. And so whether it is analyzing call scripts to figure out, what a rep is doing during a call, whether it is in the case of Nudge, doing lots of research on a company or a person so that you're better prepared for every interaction, So this kind of more grunt work AI, I think there's a lot of promise because, as you know, sales reps spend way too much time doing that type of work and not enough time actually engaging in the selling and relationship building that actually is their key skill.
So in the second iteration of, or definition, let's say, of AI that you talked about is, I don't know, I was reading a blog post on your website actually about 4 ways sales leaders can use AI. And some of the examples cited seemed more like they were just sort of analytics, right? I mean, taking data sets that sort of existed and data or statistics could be derived otherwise. And it seems sort of, I don't know, to me, a little bit AI light to some degree. I mean, so we have this big trend with big data coming into sales, obviously, is there's a distinction, though, between just the analytics and AI.
Absolutely. I think that especially if you look at stuff that is more around reporting more, it's always going to start at the base level of just doing first level analytics. Where the AI comes into is where you apply machine learning to have a continuous improvement process around it. So by interacting with a tool, let's look at it as something as simple as I want to understand engagement across, how my reps are driving engagement pre-pipeline into the accounts that they're supposedly going after. First level maybe just analytics. Here's a report of every person and their engagement profile across different sets, say call it 100 named accounts. But if you go to the second iteration where now machine learning is taking into account the outcomes of those deals, like how many went into pipe, how many closed, and you can now iterate back and say, based on these profiles, these reps need to do more. These reps are actually good. You get into that continuous learning environment, which really AI can drive.
On Frontline Friday this week, episode 516, Bridget and I spoke about sales quotas. Now, research studies claim that fewer than 50% of sales reps are making their quota each year. So the question Bridget and I dive into is, if that research is true, and so few reps are making quota, then what's the point of quota? I mean, shouldn't we find a more meaningful way to measure sales performance?
I agree. I can't speak to, you probably can more than I can, because you talk to a lot of people VPs of sales and people in industry and studies and stuff regarding how much companies and managers are thinking about this topic. It's on my mind a lot. In fact, earlier in the week, one of the founders had said, Bridget, it's really important that next quarter all the reps meet their quota. I said,
and why?
Well, I didn't even say why. I said, yes, that's what I think about all day long, every day. My job is I feel that it is my job to help them achieve that. Yes, they have a piece of it, but I need to make them successful. That's what I look to do each and every day. I feel grateful that I work for a company that believes that that's important also. Because I have worked for and with executives that don't think they should meet quota, that think if the reps are meeting quota, the quota is too low. It's a philosophy. I don't know where they get the other philosophy, but it's a philosophy.
Yeah, I look at, yeah, to me it's just so counterintuitive, right? Is that you arbitrarily decide a certain number of reps should make quota. You arbitrarily decide that the company needs to grow this amount next year, therefore quotas need to go up that amount, as opposed to saying, well, another way to grow is to have a higher fraction of our sales reps actually meet their quota. And having experienced what it feels like to make quota, to be paid commission, to earn more money, then you've increased their stake in their own success. So instead of boosting quotas 30% this year, boost it 10%. And you may find you're going to get that 30% growth you want, because you're going to have more people contributing to the success within sales. And having brought them into the fold as a quote-unquote top performer, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure they continue to do that. It's almost like you and I spoke about last episode about how bosses, when they hired new salespeople, always wanted to make sure they made some big purchase that committed them financially, so they had the motivation to, well, hey, you make more money, you got to start spending a little more money. You're going to want to have a lifestyle you want to maintain. it's just the way people operate. We have a little more money. Mostly they spend it these days. So yeah, get people experiencing that success and making a little more money. You've got them hooked.
Well, so Andy, you and I are obviously in agreement here. Why do you suppose, what's the other side of the coin? Why? Because it's also prevalent. You and I are on the same side, that we believe that reps should make money, that they feel successful, that success starts off this chain reaction of more success. What's the argument for the other? What are we missing?
Finally, we wrapped up the week with episode 517 with my guest, Pat Helmers. Pat is the host of the Sales Babble podcast and author of the Selling with Confidence sales system. In our conversation, we talked about startup selling and how to make sure you hire the right people for your first salespeople.
So the work part is, first I have them fill this form, and the next thing I say, what I'd like you to do is give me a demo of some piece of software. So whatever you're working on, I would say, I'm going to get you a free account. I'm not going to give you any coaching, but I just want you to give me a 15-minute presentation on how the software works. And people who can't technically figure that out, just never do it. People who struggle with it, get their friends to help them. It becomes obvious when they're giving the demonstration. It becomes pretty obvious who's adept at this and who isn't.
And do you have them actually then pick up the phone and call a customer?
I actually have them call. I act like I'm a customer, and I give them common, objections that I commonly hear, and see how they how they address them.
Okay.
And I kind of, an interesting thing about that is that, sometimes they feel like, oh, they've done really, really bad. But I commonly, at the end of the call, I'll call them back and say, you did really good. I didn't give you any training. I'm not looking for perfection. And I'll tell them I'm not looking for perfection. But the ones who you could tell they've really put a lot of energy into it, and they've really tried very, very hard to win me over. I mean, that's if it looks like they have the base set of skills that I can work with, that's adequate. That's fine. So many people don't even get that far. You would be surprised, Andy. 3/4 of the people don't get this far.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all. I mean,
but they could have shown up, right, in an interview. I was working with a guy this spring who was doing this. People would apply and he'd say, well, let's meet for lunch. He'd immediately meet with them for lunch. And he would just be blown away by some of these people, and he'd up and hire them. And you'd say, well, maybe you should have checked references or walked through their references. No, you never, ever truly assessed their skills. And since he's been doing this process, his process is a little bit different than this because he is a marketing company.
Sure.
But it's been phenomenal, the workers that he's getting. Now he's actually getting productivity out of them compared to the people that he was hiring last year.
Yeah, I mean, hiring is really an exercise in risk management. So
Seth Godin's got something where he'll say that what he tries to do is he tries to get people to intern for him for free.
Sure.
But that's got it tough. And I guess in some businesses,
if you're Seth Godin.
Yeah, people would want to do that.
Right.
But this is the next best thing. This is the next best thing. So you can really, really see whether or not people, this process works.
Yeah, well, I think any process that combines assessments and testing of skills and capabilities.
There's a part there too where you walk through the resume, and this could take like 3 hours where you walk through their resume line by line. Explain this to me. What's going on here? And you kind of look to see whether their whole story, their whole life story makes sense.
Thanks again for joining us. Until next week on Accelerate Expresso, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. So that's it, friends. Another excellent week of Accelerate, the world's best sales podcast. Please take 30 seconds right now. Go to iTunes, subscribe, leave a review. I personally want to know what I can do to make this an even more valuable resource for you. For our regular listeners, I'll see you bright and early Monday morning. For everyone else, we'll see you again back here next week. Until then, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.